Hello, this is story number 13 of the series Blue Marble Defenders. Title, The Shadow of Kilimanjaro. Subtitle, Endurance, Danger, and Snarkitis. Chapter 1, A 5-Day Hike. Heavy hiking boots, hot sun, altitude, and jet lag. They drained Leo's energy, and at 4 p.m. he had to admit he'd underestimated the challenge. One foot after another on a rocky trail for hours, scratched by tall bushes, staying alert, keeping others in sight, calling out when out of sight. The morning's excited, expectant chatter was long gone. The trail was only as wide as his hips, and it lay a boot's depth from the surrounding soil. Some rock, some mud, some insects, some branches smacking his face. At least there were no more monkeys in the trees and trying to get into the backpack, he thought. This adventure has become an endurance test. How much more slogging? How much work is ahead in pitching tents and preparing chow? Do we need to share guard duty through the night? The bushes became denser and taller, with a few free trees interspersed. Voices ahead. Porters working behind bushes. The guide stepped out. "We gave you an easy first day, and you already made it to our campsite. The 2 tents for your family are in there, and since you're the first to arrive, you can take your pick." Leo nodded and thanked him. He had made his way through a grassy path to the closest green tent when he heard the guide call out, "But don't wander off! Lots of animals around here, some only a nuisance, but some dangerous." That was it. No explanation. Leo decided he'd wait for the others to catch up before asking questions. Tall bushes blocked the grand, expansive views he'd imagined that he would see when climbing Africa's highest mountain. While waiting for the others, he checked out both tents and noticed the table had been set up in a dining room carved out of the jungle. But the table was far from level, and Leo could see that things would spill the moment they sat down. But he could easily fix it. When Pops had walked into his workshop last week and seen his rough design, he said, "Gee, that might be perfect for our African assignment." Leo looked at him quizzically, and Pops explained that the Blue Marble Defenders had been invited by the director of Tanzania's national parks to investigate reports of extraterrestrials on Mount Kilimanjaro's summit. After an excited cheer, Leo had thrown himself into building his portable table. Now, kneeling on the side of a 5,895-meter mountain, he smiled as he made it perfectly level in a few seconds. "Leonardo, are you messing with the Mona Lisa again?" Rookie's jibe startled Leo, and he responded, "You simply plop one smelly boot after another on these trails, but I'm sticking to my work ethic." Rookie rolled his eyes. "Oh boy, here it comes again." "Yeah," Leo said. "Every day in every way I get better and better." Rookie said, So boring. I'm actually enjoying this spectacular adventure, and my mind's recording technicolor memories of the beautiful flora and fauna of exotic Africa." Mom and Pops had been listening to this from the trail. Mom stepped into the opening and said, "Well, thank you for the comedy routine, boys. I was feeling tired and hungry, but you've given my tired body new energy." Then she rolled her eyes and shook her head. Pop surveyed the dining room hacked from the jungle by machete and said, "Leo, your table looks great. If it works here, it'll work anywhere." The family had arrived by jet at Kilimanjaro Airport in Arusha, Tanzania. Their guide had met them and taken them straight from the plane to the trailhead. Their jet lag, the long hard hike, and the warning to stay near the tents led them to ask the cook for an early dinner. Discussion at the table was mainly around the maize and potato fields they'd passed, the humble mud and stick buildings, the changes in the terrain, the kids running up and asking for chocolate, the scrub, the heather, and the dense forest. After dinner, everyone was soon asleep on soft foam mats. Chapter 2. The Rongai Route. The family was up early, enjoyed a quick breakfast in the jungle dining room, and hit the trail. Their party consisted of a guide, an assistant guide, and 8 porters who carried their sleeping gear, cooking gear, food, and water. The bushes thinned and opened to an expansive short grass field, and they followed the guide until midday, when he helped them navigate a 3-way split in the path. The guide told the 4 of them to simply follow the main path, and he headed out himself on a rough shortcut to set up their evening campsite. They ate lunch and navigated ever upward through the rolling countryside, over rocky paths and dry riverbeds. Following the path was not as easy as they expected, because several times it disappeared at expanses of flat rock, and they needed to hunt for it and decide among alternatives. The constant altitude gain drained everyone's energy, but when rocky spires rose in the near distance, their spirits rose too. The trail curved downhill. Rookie saw a small lake behind the boulders on his right, and he led the 4 down a steep section. Green tents and a smaller pond came into view, and then a table with a white tablecloth and place settings. Rookie blinked his eyes, and when the others caught up to him, Pops said, "Take a look at our reward for a solid day's work. The campsite looks great, but how about us checking out that fantastic playground just behind it?" The lake was called the Mwanzi Tarn, and the steep spires of shattered rock were the Mwanzi Peak's sentinels. When they arrived at the campsite, they were greeted by the guide and by Idris and Keanu, 2 friendly porters who also spoke English. They ditched their backpacks, sat at the table, and relaxed while drinking water for a few minutes. Rookie mused, "Hey, Pops, from now on, we'll have porters and cooks every time we go for a hike, right?" Pops replied, "We can, and I promise you cooks and porters every time in the future, if and only if you beat me to that giant boulder over there." Pops made the 3 others eat dust. He was lightning. He wasn't about to pay for cooks in the future. There was another small pond beyond the boulder. They climbed around it and up the sides of a steep, wild ravine, turning back only when their hunger pangs struck. The vegetarian meal was delicious, and they slept so well that in the morning even Pops was commenting that maybe porters and cooks should be in our future. The next morning, then the guide warned them they were in for a big hike. They climbed up to a vast saddle that gave them their first good view of the enormity of Kilimanjaro. The peak's snow and ice seemed so far above that it could have been floating on a cloud. The guide said, "The name Kilimanjaro combines Swahili words meaning white and mountain. My grandfather told me that there was much more snow in the past." Then he pointed to an almost invisible speck on the mountainside. "That's our destination, the Kibo Hut. All but 2 of the porters are now heading down because you won't need tents tonight. Your bunks are reserved at Kibo, and I'll wake you before midnight to start the serious climb." The boys looked at each other, rolling their eyes. "So this wasn't serious climbing?" Ricky asked. The guide gave a pinched-lipped smile and shook his head. Chapter 3. The Cloud. "Let's get to it," Leo said, and he and Rookie set out running on the straight path over the shoulder in the direction of the Kibo Hut. It was almost level, and they were almost out of sight of the rest of the party when the air changed. Suddenly, they were cold, even though they'd been running. Looking to the left, the boys saw wispy tongues of mist coming toward them. In only seconds, the mist had blocked the sun. 2 minutes later, they couldn't see each other. Each was blind, alone. Rookie called out, and Leo followed his voice. And step after step, with hands stretched in front, they found each other. But they could barely see their outstretched elbows or the ground beneath their feet. They wanted to move forward and climb out of the fog, but the ground was barely visible and they couldn't see the path, never mind follow it. The temperature dropped, and each took his jacket from his backpack. Where were Mom and Pops, the guide, Idris, and Keanu? Sheesh, Leo said. After that episode back then on the Mer de Glace, I told myself I'd never make stupid decisions like the ones that got us trapped in a crevasse. But I never thought of going fast as making a decision. Rookie agreed. They tried yelling, but knew there was no chance others could hear. But it got colder, and fear crept in. They started to shiver. All they could do was jump up and down with their hands in their pockets to keep warm and quell the regret of separating from the others. Danger in Africa comes from lions and leopards, but fog? Leo asked. Do you think we'll get out of this alive? Leo responded. From down on the plains, this fog looks like a cloud, and we know clouds eventually drift away. I imagine it's no big deal, but it could take a while to lift. We have to stay warm and not move around so that the others are sure to find us. The cloud did lift off, but only after giving them another half hour of cold worry. The rest of the party had been lower, and the cloud rose for them more quickly, allowing them to start earlier and be close when Leo and Rookie could finally see. They slogged ahead together until they reached the Kibo hut about 5 o'clock. It had been a long day. They would have liked to just collapse on a bed, but the hut was mobbed inside and outside. The guide checked with the hut master about the bunks, but he didn't sort things out until 7 p.m. All were hungry, but the hut's food had run out, and they ate only the emergency rations they had, like energy bars, nuts, Tootsie Rolls, and chocolate that they'd brought along. They settled into their bunks that were crowded 12 to a room, slept for a little more than an hour, and were rousted to don their warmest clothing for the night. Chapter 4. The Final Push. Rookie mused to himself, I can't believe I'm putting on a ski parka here on the equator. He shook his head and smiled until the moment he opened the front door. It was a deep freeze out there, far colder than the time Leo and he had fallen into a crevasse. A breeze was blowing, and he worried his gloves weren't heavy enough. The guide called him back inside because the hut master had brought tea and bread and honey. Eat all you can, he said. When finished, each pulled a headlight over his ski hat, took hiking sticks from their packs, and followed the guide out the door. Sure, it was cold. It was dark, though. No stars. The world felt empty. The guide led, the family followed. Idris and Keanu carried giant backpacks, and the assistant guide came last. They saw stars, millions of bright, beautiful stars when they moved away from Kibo's lights, and their eyes adjusted. Without their headlamps, they would have tripped on each step. After 10 minutes, the guide stopped and said, If you turn around, you'll see the moon rising. It's just a few days until the full moon, so walking will soon be easier. Our most important rule now is pole pole. Slowly, slowly. You'll be climbing to 5,895 meters, or over 19,300 feet. The air is thin, and over the next hour, other climbers may turn back because of exhaustion. If you go slow, you'll make it. If you think you can dance up this mountain, my assistant will carry you down while the rest of us continue." The boys felt chastened. Not that they needed it after being lost in the fog. They hiked very slowly, but breathing was nevertheless difficult. The half-dozen lines of headlights above them on the steep slope made the mountain a wondrous, fascinating place, and it lifted their spirits. Then fatigue set in, and it seemed impossible to climb as high as those far above. But soon Idris started singing a sad melodic song in Swahili. His second song was upbeat and optimistic, the old Swiss favorite, The Happy Wanderer. They all joined in and hummed to songs they didn't recognize, even though they were breathing hard. When Idris ran out of song ideas, Rookie cranked out Yellow Submarine. Leo followed with Istanbul. Mom added When I'm 64. And Pops growled out The Gypsy Rover. Singing took energy and occasionally left them breathless, but their spirits spiked with pride when the strains of Yellow Submarine drifted down from climbers far above. The path zigzagged dozens of times and became progressively steeper. Steps shrunk so much that one boot's heel barely exceeded the other's toe, and the pace slowed until they summited Gilman Point. It was 5 a.m. and still dark. The guide congratulated them on making it to the mountain's third highest point and asked if they had energy to make it to the top. That was more than an hour away. Pops would have liked to quit. Mom would have liked to quit. Leo would have liked to quit. Rookie would have liked to quit. But they said all together, "Sure, let's go." As they turned to the left, Pops noted a sign pointing to the right that said To Leopard's Point. They were surprised that the path remained steep up there. Time passed slowly at first, but the hike became more interesting as dark blue pushed into the black sky, and they realized they were on the rim of a gigantic volcanic crater. In the dim light, the crater's far side seemed unnaturally bright, but the path was still steep, and curiosity took a back seat to just plain old forward progress. The path veered away from the crater, and when it came back 10 long minutes later, it was evident that a long, tall bank of compressed snow and ice had caused the bright spot. The party slogged slowly through the heavy scree and reached the summit just as the sun rose on the horizon. The family clasped arms, gave out a hoot, and had photos taken in front of the summit sign that said, "Congratulations, you are now on Uhuru Peak, Tanzania, 5,895 AMSL. Africa's highest point is below you. This is the world's highest freestanding mountain." As they surveyed the vast African plains far below them, Rookie asked Mom, "Do you know what AMSL means?" She replied, "I'm not certain, but I believe it means above mean sea level." As the boys explored away from the others, Leo said, "I didn't want to contradict Mom back there, but AMSL really stands for Artistic Math Skilled Leo." Rookie replied, "Well, that's similar to my first thought, which was all must salute Leo." Leo smiled and nodded and said, "Hey, that works for me too." Rookie said, "But on reflection, bro, it probably means all must smack Leo," and simultaneously gave him a backhand swipe to the guts. Before the boys could explore any further catty AMSL definitions, Pops called out, "Hey, the wind's picking up. Let's go down a bit and talk about the next few days." When they reached a protected spot, Pop said, "Guys, Mom and I have just finished our commute, and it's time for us to go to the office. We'll be camping down by the glacier while we search for the extraterrestrial that's been worrying the government. Those giant packs stay with us. Kiana will set up and guard the tent, cook, and help out. Oh, and Leo, you're still okay with us giving him your new table as an extra thank you for his efforts, right? Leo nodded and gave a thumbs up. Pop said, Idris has offered to guide you two boys down the mountain on the other side and to his home over the border in Kenya. He'll then put you on a bus to Nairobi, and you'll meet Mom and me in, say, 4 or 5 days. Okay, any questions? Leo asked, Is this a good place to take off our parkas? The air was still frigid. The wind had picked up, and Rookie looked at Leo as if he were an extraterrestrial with a learning disability. Pops replied, Yes, thanks for remembering, Leo. You won't be cold long. You guys are going down where it's warmer, and the sun's rising quickly. Pops gave one jacket to Keanu and the other to the assistant guide, who had hiked in only a shirt and sandals, while the family wore sweaters, ski parkas, boots, hats, and gloves. Keanu, Idris, and the guide gave big smiles. Rookie and Leo each gave a thumbs up. They split into 2 parties but walked together until the trail intersected the Moeka route at Stella Point. Mom and Pops broke off to follow Keanu across the crater floor and toward the glacier. Chapter 5. Heading Down. Idris guided Leo and Rookie down the Moeka, and as the trio jumped over rocks, Idris said, This route's steeper than the wrong guy that we had come up, but it's shorter. I'm glad we're not going down the Marangu route. It's too crowded and you don't feel connected with a mountain and with nature. Did you know the Marangu is called the Coca-Cola route? That's because it's easy. It appeals to Westerners, and it's crowded. Rookie said, This might be steep, but going down's a lot easier than going up. Idris went on, In case your father didn't tell you the details of our trip, it's a lot more hiking, but not a climb like we just done. We'll stay overnight at a hut near the bottom of Kilimanjaro and tomorrow at my cousin's village along the path. We'll first be near the Kilimanjaro Game Reserve in Tanzania, and then near the Masai Amboseli Game Reserve in Kenya. If you keep up with my pace, we'll make it to my house in Namanga by the 3rd night. I've got a few things there I'd like to show you, and then you'll take the bus to Nairobi. You have your hotel's name and address, right? Both Leo and Rookie nodded in agreement. Their day had started before midnight, and they'd had only an hour or 2 of sleep. Rookie's legs didn't like the non-stop steep descent as much as he expected, and they jiggled like rubber by the time the trio arrived at the Moeka camp. There they tanked up on water, ate with another group that had summited that morning, flopped onto their bunks, and slept like rocks. Idris woke them at first light, and they hit the trail again over their legs' objections. Idris was one of the few Maasai who acted as mountain porters. He was a kind person, tall, strong, cautious, but apparently fearless. He had put on a pair of trousers and a jacket for the final Kilimanjaro pitch, but now, as before, he wrapped himself with a red wool blanket with blue lines that made squares. Rookie and Leo were glad for their baseball caps protecting themselves from the sun, but Idris' head was always uncovered. They walked fast through the forest and tall bushes on a narrow track, but when it widened for them, wide enough to walk side by side, Idris became a tour guide. He first told them about the scourge of wild animal poaching. He said the most terrible were Western hunters with high-powered rifles shooting lions for trophies, and next were those who killed elephants and rhinos for tusks and for their horns. But locals poaching smaller animals to eat themselves or sell in their communities were also a big problem. A truck came up behind them on the dirt track and slowed next to Idris. He spoke with the driver and motioned the boys to jump into the open back of the truck. "Hey, it's good to have friends with wheels," he said with a smile. He can't take us all the way to my cousin, but this gets us off our feet for a while." They bounced, banged, and ate dust for about 20 minutes, but the ride saved them about 2 hours of walking. When the landscape opened into rolling grass plains with occasional clumps of trees, Rookie and Leo missed the truck. They were vulnerable, and they knew it. Leo said, "Gee, Idris, we're all alone out here. What do we do if a rhino or a lion attacks us?" "Well, if a rhino should attack, the first thing to remember is they have poor eyesight. Simply hide behind a tree and they won't be able to find you." Leo asked, But what if there are no trees?" Rookie cut in, "We simply hide behind you, dear brother." Idris chuckled. "And as for a lion, it's important to not turn and run. Stay motionless or back slowly away. If you wet your pants or even soil them, don't be embarrassed. Keep your wits about you." Rookie leaned toward Leo and sniffed loudly. Leo pushed him away. Idris rolled his eyes at this scene and continued, "You may not have noticed my walking stick. See its sharp point? If I hadn't been on the mountain, I would be carrying a spear with an iron blade. But my sharp stick will work too." He pulled out a short stick from under his robe. It was sharp on both ends, and he said, "This little one is in case I can't drop the lion with my walking stick. I jam it into his open mouth and twist it." "I bet fighting a lion is hard for you to imagine," he said. "But you should know that before my village would consider me a real warrior and a man, I had to kill a lion. Of course, my father didn't want to lose his boy for the sake of a ritual, so he and all the men gave me training for months and months. My brother helped too. But don't worry this afternoon. Lions are lazy, and they sleep most of the day. It's unlikely that we would see any." "Roar!" Leo had been standing behind Rookie when he clasped his hands down hard on Rookie's shoulder and yelled. His surprise drama was rewarded with an elbow to the guts. The afternoon was hot, dusty, thirsty, and long. Idris occasionally interrupted the trek to describe birds and animals, and they stopped for a while to watch a cluster of vultures clawing and pecking an animal carcass in the distance. He described how zebra and wildebeest happily graze together because they each eat different parts of the grass. And he told of how 1.5 million wildebeest migrate from the nearby Serengeti in search of lush grasslands not far from them, while lions, crocodiles, and other predators wait for those wildebeest to slow or to drink at streams. He said the Maasai migrate too when the game or firewood becomes scarce. Toward the end of the afternoon, Idris waved toward a lone, tall man standing on the hill ahead. "We're close to my cousins. Those people are my community, but I never live with them at this spot. That sentinel is a warrior, standing guard against animals or human predators." The village sat on the open savanna with only a few acacia trees visible, and as they approached they saw a fence surrounding it all, made from small logs and rough boards about 2 meters high. Idris pointed and said, "That's nighttime protection from animals." Rookie was walking behind, and Leo pointed to him with his thumb, saying, "Idris, do you think we should offer the animals an alternative to breaking in? You know, like leave this guy outside the fence." That remark earned Leo a kick in the butt. Chapter 6. The Maasai Village. The village had a flat ceremonial ground of packed red dirt a short distance away from the dwellings. As they approached, Idris's cousin ran up and greeted him. They soon were surrounded by dozens of people, most clad in bright red and other colored garments, some with jewelry that was very colorful and elaborate. The people were animated, their faces friendly, the men and boys jumping, and soon all broke into a welcome song. Idris's cousin also spoke English, saying he learned it to help sell the community's handmade jewelry and fabrics to tourists. He told the boys he was honored to have them as guests. They would sleep in his house, and in the time before dinner, he would tell them more about the village. As he led them toward the dwellings, he said, "You can see we make our houses from cow dung and mud. It's an easy way to build and insulates well from the day's heat and the night's coolness. We first build a lattice work of sticks and then add mud and grass. We do all that for the walls and roof, but other villages use only thatch grass for the roofs." When they were in front of his hut, he said the boys could leave their backpacks there, and he gratefully acceptance. Ricky was first in, and he took a moment for his eyes to acclimate to the darkness. He placed his own pack next to the far wall and offered to take Leo's. "Whoa! This is heavy! Really heavy! Leo! How'd you haul this to the top of Kilimanjaro? Better yet, why did you take something this heavy?" Leo replied, "Oh, I always have a lot of stuff." When they came back out, Idris's cousin said, "Our tradition has been to do most cooking inside, but visiting medical experts told us the smoke causes illnesses, especially in children. And we are experimenting with using small iron stoves. We like that they use far less wood. Women and children are responsible for finding firewood. Long ago, there were forests right where we stand, but now we must cross all these grasslands to find wood. It's normal for each child to miss 1 or 2 days of school each week while gathering firewood." As they walked on, Rookie whispered, "Such a wonderful problem to have." "That wooden building over there is the schoolhouse. Let's go around and sit on the bench behind it, and I'll tell you more." The boys looked in the door as they passed. The school wasn't in session, but they could see several blackboards, student drawings on walls, and orderly rows of desks and chairs. "Here's a test for you. What type of tree is that in the distance?" "Ah," Leo said, "I really like the elongated shape of its crown, and it shows up in every book I read about Africa. I think it's an acacia tree." Rookie said, "Nope, it's a mimosa, right?" Idris's cousin said, "Well, if I were to say it's a thorn tree, all three of us would be right. Good work. You passed your test. Now, do you have any questions for me?" Leo said, "When we first arrived, I was surprised to see most people wearing red garments. Why is that?" "The Maasai believe the color red scares away lions. Most men prefer to wear their shuka, their robe, in either solid red or red with designs. You may have also noticed some women dye their hair red, too. Red has become a symbol of our culture. More questions?" Rookie asked, "Why were all the men and boys jumping around when you came to welcome us?" "Ah, another good question. Jumping, a pulsating chant, and sweeping movements are included in most of our dances. The most important dance is called the Adamu. It's a dance celebrating a boy's passage into manhood. I'm not certain how jumping came to be so important to us, but girls do tend to favor the boys who can jump the highest. Maybe they see them as being the strongest. Idris may not have told you, but he is a very strong jumper, and he jumps straight up to 80 centimeters. Do you have any other questions?" When Leo and Rookie shook their heads no, Idris's cousin said, "I smell the smoke of cook fires, so I offer you 2 quick lessons. First, do you see those 2 sticks and ball of dry grass there against the wall? Those are all the tools a Maasai uses to start a fire. I don't have time now, but you might ask Idris to make a fire for you with it when he has a moment. My last lesson is about food. We Maasai mainly eat meat, milk, and blood. We do eat maize as porridge and occasionally tubers, other plants, honey, and certain tree barks. The meat is most often goat and the milk from cows, but some tribes have chickens and others have fish. Generally, we reserve the goat's kidneys for children and intestines for women. Ricky couldn't wait to ask his burning question. But, you eat blood? What blood? And how? Well, young man, blood most often comes from cows. You carefully nick the cow's jugular artery and blood spurts out. And you typically catch it in a bowl or a bag. But it can also go straight into your mouth. We often mix it with milk or yogurt, sometimes with tea, and sometimes even with butter as a food for babies. With a smile at the boy's discomfort, he stood and said, "Let's go eat. You'll be asked if you want your goat raw or cooked. It's your choice," he said with a grin. The boys were happy to see thin strips of meat being roasted on sticks that were standing buried in the ground near fires, as well as a big pot of ugali, a thick maize porridge served with milk. They were surprised to see girls and women eating separately, but mealtime was pleasant with the boys and men, even though most spoke no English. When Idris noticed their energy was flagging, he took them to his cousin's single-room hut and unrolled sleeping mats next to their backpacks. Leo and Rookie were out in seconds and slept like stones until Idris shook them the next morning.